Leading intergenerational worship can be a bit of a challenge. Whether it's a whole service or a few songs where the children are in with the adults, it can be difficult to create engagement and participation across a wide age range. We've run a whole series of podcasts, season 2 if you want to go back and listen, and articles in our Roots Worship Together magazine and online, exploring intergenerational ministry. And today we're thinking specifically about singing together. How can we encounter God across the generations in sung worship? I'm Melanie Cave, Managing Director at Roots, and today I'm speaking with Becky Drake. Together with her husband Nick, she founded Worship for Everyone in 2010, intergenerational ministry resourcing churches, schools and homes with music and training. As well as leading worship, Becky is a school chaplain, and she and her husband are part of the leadership team at Gas Street Church in Birmingham. I think you'll love her heart for engaging with God and all ages, and the practical tools she shares. Thanks for joining us on the Roots for Churches podcast. Here we go. Welcome, Becky, to the Roots for Churches podcast. I'm so delighted to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
So we're going to talk about intergenerational worship, worshipping when there are children, adults, all together. Can you give me a bit of your backstory? Like, how did you get involved, interested in intergenerational worship?
Yes, of course. Well, I've always written songs. I've always loved songwriting from a very, very young age, like a young teenager, and loved writing worship songs. Then met my husband at university. We got married soon after uni, and he's also a musician and songwriter who loves worship. And actually his first job was a full-time paid worship pastor in a church in London. So we moved early on in our 20s to a church that had probably around 100 kids. And obviously for the UK, that is a lot of children.
That is a lot, yeah.
It's a lot. And we already stepped into a church that was doing probably about 15 minutes of what they were calling all age worship every week. So children in for a time of singing, the whole church together. And while we had a lot of experience leading adults in worship, actually this was quite new. So I think suddenly having a room full of many different ages, but also crucially, we were given the sort of historical songs that they had done. So we just stepped into that, began leading the kind of songs because we didn't know where to look. Had historically happened. And we began to see, I suppose what we described a little bit of a mismatch between times of worship when there were only adults in the room. So basically in this particular context, the children would leave after about 15 minutes to go to their kids. And we continue to worship as adults. And we felt that that time of worship was a space where there was really kind of high expectation for what God might do. You know, that we were leading people on a sort of worship journey to adoring God, and on the other hand, we might be having quieter times of intimacy with him and really inviting the Holy Spirit to meet with us in those times of worship. However, that early time of worship, when kids were in the room, we were clocking, they're calling this all age, but if we look at the back of the room where most of the adults are, they don't seem to be engaging much in this. And it seems more like this is a sort of young kids' time of worship with songs that were often teaching scripture, which is great in and of itself. Had a different kind of set of values from the songs that we were leading that were singing heart to heart to God, if that makes sense. I think some of the songs also felt at times a little bit silly or just young, very, very young in style, and engagement wasn't happening. So in answer to your question, we began really because we had in front of us a bit of a problem. And if he was here sitting next to me, my husband would say his initial solution to the problem was he actually wrote to the elders of the church and said, "This isn't working. I think we need to remove the children, let them go straight to their kids' groups." That was his answer.
Because were the children engaging, like with those songs?
Well, that's also a really good question. I'd say maybe the preschoolers and some of the much younger children were sort of dancing around and doing actions. But if we looked up at some of the older children and teenagers, no, they weren't.
Yeah.
They were
so it was for under fives, basically.
Under fives worship. Now, in answer to the letter my husband wrote suggesting the children leave, thankfully, there was a committed group of elders that said, "No, Nick, that's not the answer. Please get on with your job." And so we as songwriters felt, well, okay, let's have a go at writing some songs with the goal of engaging the whole room. And that's the beginning of the story. So for our local church, we began writing songs. And I suppose our goal was there's the simplicity that children can engage with, but there's enough musical expression and still depth that adults can engage with this as well. And that's the beginning of the journey, Melanie, that God has basically took us on for the next 2 decades, for the last 20 years.
Wow. Yeah. Well, That's 2 decades of experience of making this work. So
Well,
that's worth leaning
trying
into.
to make,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think there is an element of that. There is every setting is different, every group of people is different. So there isn't one size fits all. There are principles that work, but I think there's also taking the people you're with on the journey.
yes,
If you just pull out a song, that doesn't always fix the problem. And so there's something of the ethos and the understanding and some skills of worshiping together that need to come as well as the songs.
yes,
So
absolutely.
can you give us a definition for intergenerational worship? Like, what are we going after here? Because we've talked about it's more than the children being in the room, but
Absolutely.
how would you describe intergenerational worship?
Well, I think that is a really critical thing to understand, first of all, isn't it? And of course,
Mm,
some churches are just one generation. They may
yeah.
be an aging church that just has a few older people in it, for example. And then there are churches that will have in the congregation 1, 2, 3, 4 generations altogether. But as you say, just being present in the room doesn't mean necessarily everybody is participating. And I think participation is one of my first definitions of intergenerational worship, that there's a space where we are all able to engage together. And it might look different for everyone, but I grew up in a church that had many generations, but was very geared at adults, for example. So the content was adult led. And I guess as a child, I was just expected to sort of muck it, go along with it, not understanding a lot of it. And so I would say flourishing intergenerational gathering, if we're talking just about that corporate space, is one where the leaders are mindful of everyone and are curating that time together, therefore, with all ages in mind, which might need some adaptation in how we speak or the songs we pick, etc. And then the goal as well, and the definition of intergenerational, is not just that vertical, are we engaging with God, but also the side by side with one another.
Mm,
And I think that's a whole other area where the joy is if there's relationship on each side as well, so that when we're worshiping God together, we also know one another. And we know that we're part of that family of God together. So does that answer your question, Melanie?
yeah, I think it does. But I guess my question is like, in practice,
Mm,
say in that church in London or where you are in Gas Street, like
yeah.
it's probably a big room full
Yeah.
of people and there's a band on the stage. And if there are children coming to an intergenerational worship, they're probably with their family. So there's relationship obviously with their family. How does that sort of side by side relational interaction? Because worship is rightly focused towards God and God is our focus. We are worshiping, we're praising. How do we get that sort of interaction, participation, awareness of others with us on the worship journey
Yes.
when we're in a big room and everybody's facing forward and maybe the people you know are your family? Like, how does that bit happen?
Well, I think this is much easier in small churches and medium churches. So
Mm,
Gas about 5 locations, and this last week, for example, I was in one of our smaller locations that has an intergenerational service every week. Now, when I step into that space, they just know each other because they can. So actually, with a church that's a fairly small or medium church that have journeyed for a long time, you almost don't need to do much work there, because as long as it's welcoming and there's that culture, they will know one another because they
mm,
see each other every week. Now, in the bigger settings, so like our Gas Street Central is a really big setting, I actually think this is where music is deeply powerful, because it's going to be a different crowd every week in a big church. That's just a different complication that you have in a big setting. Lots of visitors, people come and go. It's a big city centre church. But one thing that music can do, it's a unifier, isn't it? That
mm,
is a space where if we select and carefully lead those songs in those times of worship and find songs that will engage the adults, but also are simple enough for children to join in with, we've already got a moment of unity there, where across the room, children can look at grown-ups of different ages and vice versa, and see one another engaging with God with the same words, with the same actions. I mean, music, this is one part of the answer, but music is a powerful tool for
mm,
helping in those bigger settings.
mm. And is there something about just the room layout or how people, like if it's dark, you can't see other people. So is there something about like making sure that we can see that the other people are engaging, or that it's not just all lit on the stage, or it's not lit up near the altar, depending on the layout of your church? Sometimes some of the big Anglican churches, there's all these sort of barriers to being able to see, and there's a choir loft and all of these things. And it's like, how do you see the other people who are worshiping around? Because, we could just worship through a screen
Yeah.
or play a recording. The point is that we're actually gathered together. And particularly with children who are quite small, they sometimes can't see over the chairs in front of them. So how do we create this, like, we're actually in this together feeling? If you've got freedom to move things around, what sort of layouts do you think help intergenerational worship?
Well, I love that question because I'm always saying to people, the joy of this, I think, is in the experimentation. And we can get so stuck, can't we,
Mm,
as
mm,
churches, in what we have always done and what we always do. And so there are actually so many ways you can experiment with the environment. I mean, I've been in churches that have taken half the chairs away. So there's space at the front for little ones who can't see over chairs to sit. In fact, we used to do that often in our previous church. I would always say, bring your grown up with you. So that, again, it's not about we push the kids to the front, but there's a sense of actually we're journeying this together. And my parents' church at the moment is once a month experimenting with tables and conversation. And we've been talking about that in one of our locations here because you get, again, the opportunity for a different kind of discussion that can happen.
mm.
People are sitting together. So I think certainly spaces, and in terms of lighting, absolutely. The moody lighting perhaps is fine if you've got a room full of students who love all that. But with little children, it might just be as simple as let's raise the lighting up a little bit, bring the children to the front. And I think what you're touching on there is sometimes it isn't rocket science with Intergen. It's actually very small things can make quite a significant difference to how something feels and is therefore accessed.
Yeah, yeah. And volume with little children. Like if you've got this very dynamic drummer, are they behind a screen? Is it because you want the children to come to the front, but the children are actually going, actually, no, I would like to go to the back because this is too loud.
Yeah.
And children have more sensitive ears. So it's all those little catches that make a big difference about where children feel more comfortable in the room and wanting to be there and wanting to be able to see and worship and dance and move. No, that's really helpful. So as we're taking people on this intergenerational journey, I think there's something about, like, why do we have children in with us? We're trying to model worshiping together. So it is a little bit of a teaching moment of like, this is how you worship. Now we might say worship is innate, but I would also say it's a skill. Like we naturally have awe and wonder, but I think there is a skill to choosing gratitude, choosing to praise, focusing our hearts on God. How do you sort of help children and adults within that intergenerational space to worship together? How do you coach that or facilitate that? Are there things that you're teaching or speaking over as you introduce songs?
Absolutely. I always say to worship leaders, you've got to talk more when you've got children in the room. You've got to talk more. And actually, for some musicians and some worship leaders, that's really challenging because we're not always trained from the start to do that. We might be really musical and know how to lead a song, but how to lead a room and teach a room is actually,
Mm,
you're right, it's a different skill. I would say, first of all, that just by being in worship, I do think some of the education of how to become a worshipper happens because that's how children grow in all areas, isn't it? They
mm,
watch, they observe, they learn, they feel the spirit, even if they've not got words for that
yeah.
yet.
And they mimic.
They mimic
They will do whatever posture.
with the arm, just like they babble before they understand meaning.
Yes, exactly.
The arms might go without them knowing why, but eventually that will connect and there'll be purpose and it will feel very natural to them. But that doesn't fully answer your question because you're also right. There is an element, as I said, that speaking more will help children, but it will actually help the whole room. And that's what I love about this. There are so many things that we've grown up with in our churches that we've probably not thought about. And I often find when you actually ask the question, well, why do we sing? There'll be lots of very seasoned Christians that don't really know how to answer that. And it's an opportunity to actually disciple the whole church into
Mm,
generational worship. So for me, if I'm leading a time of worship, I don't know, say I've got 3 songs. I know it'll be different in every context, but say I've got 3 songs where everybody's in the room. I will always begin, or whoever is leading the service, we might tag team it with a bit of vision. So some of this is just naming quite repeatedly lines like, it's so great that we're all gathered together, every generation. God loves it when all his people come together. It's a chance to celebrate him. Like these can be very simple lines. Everyone understands what it is to celebrate somebody, like on a birthday or something. We'll
mm,
celebrate God. And so I might start off the worship time like that. If I've got a more quiet or reflective song, I will just name literally that. We're going to have a song now that's a little bit quieter and more reflective. This might be a chance for you to tell God some of the things that are on your heart and mind this morning, perhaps some of your worries. And again, I always try and make things very explicitly all age. Are there things you're worried about in school at the moment? Have you got challenges in your families? That might be more for the adults. Let's use this song to bring those prayers before God. So we're inviting the whole room, but also slightly teaching them that this is what worship is about. It's a heart connection with God. You can talk to him through this song. Equally, I will talk about what we're doing with our bodies. I've often used our hands to explain, if you feel comfortable, shall we put our hands out in front of us? It might be a way of saying, I'm here. I'm all yours, God. Or child-friendly language might look like saying, it could be a way of saying, God, thank you that you're coming towards me, or you're giving me a hug, however we feel comfortable phrasing those things. But as I said, I think by doing this, often what happens is adults think, oh, that's why we do this stuff.
Well, there's people who are new to faith as well, who've joined as adults and don't have this background. And so a lot of the things that people do in church, whether it's kneeling, whether it's, in some churches, they would never raise their hands in worship, but the sort of reverence, even then, like, why are we doing this? Why is it solemn? Why is it like this? And giving some very short explanation, I think helps quite a lot of adults. And those on the journey. So I think it's not being careful not to go into like a patronizing voice and speaking only to the children, because that is a big turn off, because children hate being patronized. But I think if you can talk in simple language, adults and children both can engage without feeling patronized.
And you're absolutely right. And it's not taking things for granted. I mean, I'll give you a little example. I brought a colleague years ago that I was working with in London to church. So totally new to church. And he said to me after service, it was very lovely, but what was that weird moment where everyone went around shaking hands saying, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you. And it took me a while. I went, no, they were saying, peace be with you, peace be with you. Nobody explained the peace to him. It was like, we're now going to share the peace. And of course, he just thought we'd all become slightly robotic, giving a bizarre welcome to one another.
Halfway through as well.
Even at the start. Yeah, and it's, and again, your point, it's missional as well as helpful for the children, isn't it? When we break everything down, of course, you're not going to know what the piece is unless we tell you why we do it.
Yeah, and even why do we say peace be with you, and why, like, and if the kids ask their parents, the parents might be like, I don't know, it's tradition.
We've always done it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. I think we could do that on a lot of things. Like, why is the color changed on the altar? Why are they carrying this candle in? Why is this happening? In traditional churches, these beautiful rituals happen, and they're very significant. But if you don't know why, it's like a parade. It's like a thing. As a child, you're just looking at it going, that's weird. And then you get used to your church is weird.
Yeah.
But, and we don't question it. And there will be people who've been in that church for 60, 70 years and have no idea why that thing happens. It just does.
And of course, then the opposite's true, that once you do know why we do it, actually a whole new meaning.
Yeah. Yes. And ritual's so powerful. Symbolism, it is so, and it's a spiritual pathway for a lot of people, like understanding mystery and awe. So we do people a disservice by not unpacking these things and sharing it. And I don't think it adds I don't think it's irreverent to explain these things. I think it adds reverence. And even if you don't say it in the front, if you have it on the screen, or if you have it in the little printout, maybe, like, all of that explanation, I think, really fuels people's worship. And so there will be a lot of churches who will go, yeah, our church does that. Sort of the kids are in for the first 10, 15 minutes. And the heart behind that is great. Like, we want to be all together. But I guess my question is, how do we move beyond the token all age moment? Like, if you've got that in your church, it may actually be a bit like it's inoculating people to true intergenerational ministry, because they're like, that's that awkward bit. We had a magazine called Adult and All Age, and we've actually changed the name to Worship Together, because that feeling of all age, people kind of have a Marmite reaction to it, of like, actually, all age is that thing that's not for anybody, which is sad. It's sad, but we do actually believe that intergenerational is important and good. But this sort of token moment has messed it up, I think. So how do we get out of that and shift? Like, what would you say needs to shift for that to become truly intergenerational?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's also why we ended up calling what we do worship for everyone, because all age just seemed so tarnished for some with we've tried, it fails, or it's dull, or it's token, or yeah. So, I mean, I think first of all, my starting point would be for all of us to continue to pray with expectation for those times. So I think back to what I said about our experience in our previous church showed us that actually we need to bring our values and our expectation when children are in the room in line with our values and expectation for all of this. And so starting with that, Lord, I actually believe, sort of saying pre-prayer, pre-leading, I believe you want to meet with all these children. And I believe this is important. So will you come by your spirit? I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. So having an expectation. And then I think some of the things practically that make that time become stale is because I think typically music wise, a lot of musicians do lack a little confidence and therefore they lean heavily on those one or two songs that they've got, they know, and are familiar and they work. Yeah. It happens in schools as well. We've got these old songs that work, we're not moving on.
Yeah.
And so actually some of it can be that things just feel a bit predictable and a bit stale. And whereas our other music that we're moving a bit, we're trying to find new songs, we're excited by teaching something new. So I'd always say, like, seek out new songs, keep things fresh. That's one thing. I think in how that time is then taught and led, it's back to some of the stuff we were saying before. It will feel less token if meaning and purpose is given to it. So speaking a bit of vision is helpful. And then I think it's taking a look at how can I really best facilitate participation, because it's token if people are dialing out as well. Let's just get through this to the meaningful bit. But again, little things like, for example, for years I've been to one of my family's churches who they pull their hair out slightly because no one joins in with the actions, but they've never put an action leader at the front. And I say time and again, if you've no one leading this, it doesn't matter who it is, but somebody that's confident and can learn the actions, if you're going to do actions, we can't really expect everyone to be joining in. So sometimes it's taking a look as well at just those practical things and then putting enthusiastic people at the front. And I think the other thing can be deciding for a season to really intentionally plan and put time and preparation, even if you've only got one song, into how you can kind of open it and how you can end it. Like, is there a little prayer moment at the end of that, even if it's just one song, that we can invite the whole room into? So let's adults pray over children. Now, children, let's pray quietly over adults. And there are many things I could say, many, many little ideas I could give, but I think almost pressing in to make more of it.
Yeah.
Rather than less is the way to move beyond token. Is that helpful, Melanie?
I think that is helpful. I'm reflecting on let's go there. Let's talk about action songs.
Yes.
Because they are, again, this is another Marmite thing. People love them or hate them. And I would say it's across the board. Some children love them and some children hate them. Plenty of adults will tolerate them. I'm not sure many adults love them. And then some adults are like, I'm not doing that. It looks stupid. I feel uncomfortable. Not going to go there. Or I will do it because my toddler is poking me. But
yes,
it's quite begrudging. So what's your take on action songs? Do you love them? And maybe convince those who are skeptical or who've had a bad experience, why they should try them again.
I do love them, but I've also been in scenarios where it's very awkward. So I fully get it. And you've got to know your context. Yeah. I mean, I do think if you're a church that's actually predominantly teenagers and, a few grandparents, it might just be that it's not a good idea to do them. You really do. There are no rules around this. And I think it's so important to liberate people to go, what's going to help my people?
That said, Forrest Frank and his little songs, my teenagers will do those dance moves. So we say teenagers don't like them, but then there's a Christian pop song that has actions and they go for it. So if there's no blanket case of this doesn't work.
Very good indeed. And in our church, for example, a lot of our action team are teenagers who love it. They love to do it. Because I think there's a tipping point of energy towards that. I think where it is really hard is if you've got one or two giving it a go. You do need the whole room to feel the power. And so in answer to that part of the question, why I love it when we get it right is that, and I really believe this from the youngest, from the youngest worshipper upwards, we are not just a voice. So that's the starting point. We're not just a voice in our worship. And worship has always been and is intended to be a whole self experience. And scripture's full of this. David did every posture under the sun and was utterly undignified in his worship. What a great role model. And so I am a real believer in us bringing our bodies as well as our voices. And I think it's very liberating. I think it enables us also to help the memory as we sing a song, use our bodies. We kind of get those words stuck inside our heads. And I think sometimes our congregations actually need help. And one of the advantages of actions when we create them well is that it can almost give a script to the more inhibited, those that do feel like they're uncomfortable putting their arms in the air or bowing down in worship. Actually, if everybody in the room is going, God, we love you, with our arms up, well, maybe we can all join in together. And that begins to release and open up something within us. I think practically as well, the reality is that very small children can't all read. And this is one way of bringing unity. We unite with our voices, but we do also, there's a place of uniting together with our bodies. And if little ones look up and they see, oh, mum, dad and grandma and John over there are all joining in with this, they don't feel on their own, that we can all participate together. But all of this defense being said, if they're not created well, this is where it starts to be awkward. And I think what we've really learned over the years in creating our actions is more like where we can just find worship movements or motions, if that makes sense. And someone said that to me this summer. They were like, what I love about your actions is I just feel like they're an extension of my worship. And little things that we've done, for example, is incorporating bits of sign language or using actions that feel very natural to what you would do anyway. Hand on my heart to say, I love you, God, or raising arms up as a prayerful moment in a song. So I think finding actions that really reflect the words and don't feel too demanding can be a really helpful way of getting buy-in. And then finally, why I love it is I do think it's an opportunity for leadership among children and young people as well. So appointing children to become action leaders is a great way to, again, aid their participation and to begin to help them a little bit towards leadership as well. So I give you a whole host of reasons.
I like those reasons. I like those reasons a lot. I think that does help. And I think I'm just thinking that the situations where I've seen it, where it's a bit cringe, is often if they've got a children's leader or a children's volunteer, it's always the children's leader or volunteer who has to get up and do the actions. And bless them, they will give it their all. But again, because that is their role, people are like, this is for the children. Whereas if you can get somebody who's enthusiastic but a bit awkward to do them, and then again, it permissions the other people to not get it perfect as well. If it feels like a dance routine and you can't do it.
I agree.
It feels too slick.
That's right. And it is an opportunity for everyone. And the other thing I think is if you've got musicians at the front who are hands-free, I always say to our backing singers, please learn the actions. We've all got to buy into this. Vicar on the front row, please learn the actions. The leadership team as well, so that it does become a whole church thing. Yeah.
No, and it is important that we lead by example. And as you say, it permissions other people to give it a go. But it is trying to get the buy-in from your whole leadership team. And so I think, maybe we need to forward this podcast to a few people and go, look, this is why we keep asking you to do the actions.
But I think you've got a time of worship in churches that are doing more than one song together. Well, and even if the songs are spread out across the service, giving variety, so not every song is an action song where children are present, is probably good as well. So there are breathers and space for people to just express themselves in the way that they would like. Yeah.
Variety. And I think the other thing is using action in prayer. So if you're doing a prayer all together, whether it's like I'm praying, I'm receiving, I'm praying for my neighborhood, and your hands are going out and around, or you reach up high and you touch the ground. However it is, it just shows that this isn't just an action song thing. We are physical, we're embodied. And again, it's just other areas, other touch points to allow this to happen and to remind people. Because I think there's something very English or very traditional church. I mean, there was a lot of stand up, sit down in church or kneel. So there was quite a bit of action, but not so much during the singing. So it's not heretical. It's preference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Let's come to this idea of leading intergenerational worship. I have this feeling that intergenerational worship is a bit like, for me, cooking Yorkshire puddings or cooking a souffle if you're a bit more advanced. Like, sometimes they rise and look beautiful and sometimes they don't. And I'm like, it's the same ingredients. Why didn't it work? And it can feel very frustrating that you've got all the elements, you've got maybe you've thought about the layout, you've thought about how you're going to lead it, and just sometimes it just feels like it falls flat. And it can
Absolutely.
feel very frustrating as a leader of going, what am I doing? Like, why do I keep pushing this if, 50% of the time it's a flop or it doesn't look like anything's happening? So I guess, can you just speak to those people who are leading this regularly and have some frustration or self-criticism of like, one, what can we do to make it more of a hit than a miss? But also, how are we assessing it? How are we kind of grading ourselves on our intergenerational worship? Because I think we probably, if you're leading it, you're on the stage or you're up the front and you're going, they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Or they look bored, therefore it didn't work. But is that the right way to sort of rate your worship and its effectiveness?
Great. I mean, I love that image of the souffle. It also makes me, I mean, I think the whole thing here makes me think about actually a nuclear family. And to give you an example, we can go out. I've got 4 kids. We could go out on any weekend and decide we're going to go for a family walk in the local woods. And some days it just goes beautifully. The sun's out, they're all getting on with each other, picking up leaves and, oh, this is lovely. And another day we go for the same walk, the sun's still shining and it's awful. They're falling out. Someone falls over, they're tired, want to go home, grumpy. And we think, well, that's been a miserable family trip. We've done nothing different.
Yeah.
And I think to encourage people in leading these gatherings, it's like it is a family. We're God's family. It's the big family of God. And within that, sometimes, whether it works or not, and we'll come on to the metrics of that in a minute, is nothing to do with what you've prepared, nothing to do with what you've planned. It's not even to do with the content, the time you've given, the prayer you've put in. But families are families full of people. This is what happens, right? But I know that I am raising my nuclear family for the long haul that will be full of those good moments and those bads. But when you begin seeing it as a family, what we're doing is setting a foundation and a groundwork, of experiences over the years that will hopefully disciple them to be good people, right? And we take this now to the church and intergenerational. One of the joys of going intergenerational and having that as a high value is, yes, that I think there will be more peaks and troughs. It's harder. We could discuss that at length about why it's harder, but it is harder. But we know now, as an encouragement, there's a lot of evidence coming out, particularly in young people, that those who have belonged in a flourishing intergenerational community are more likely to sustain their faith for the long haul. Because there's just something about being in that culture, in that environment, that is very nourishing. And I won't go off on one about that right now, Melanie, but there is a lot I could say about that. And I think
Well, it is good, but is part of the reason that they sustain their faith because they've been through the peaks and troughs? Like,
right.
if you're in a setting where it always, quote, works, and then your faith one day feels like it falls down, you have no grid for, I've powered through or I've stuck with Jesus when this is hard. Whereas if you've been in church and it's been a bit flat and you're like, it's okay, I think that does something spiritually
Really?
in us.
I do too. And it's countering that sort of consumerist thing about church, which is it's always got to be brilliant. And if it's not, well, I've had a bad week. So this is where we get into the different metrics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when we're talking intergenerational, well, what is success? If success is always that everybody has to be listening attentively to the sermon and everyone has to be joining in with the actions, well, no, it's just you're going to have some real troughs. But if success is actually today, in and amongst the chaos, everyone's felt seen, spoken to. Actually, there's been joy in the room amid the chaos, and everybody's left feeling like we have connected together across the generations in the presence of God. We've prayed over one another. It doesn't have to be perfect. Well, that's building a bank of experiences that week in, week out, through the highs and lows, are going to, I think, build a really, really strong foundation for a child and for any adult in terms of their identity in their community and their relationships. And these are the things that actually really do sustain all of us, aren't they? More than Was it a brilliant 20 minutes of a talk? Now, I would slightly counter this as well, or there's a bit of caution in that if every week it's falling flat and people are disengaged,
Yeah, yeah.
then there's some attention needs to be given to that, and there are thoughts I've got around that. But with intergenerational, the point is the metrics have to be different.
Hmm.
They are different.
Yeah. So we're looking for connection. We're looking for, we say being seen, but is there something about like, how do we actually, do we have children at the front? Do we have young people leading? Like, what do we mean by being seen? Because that's kind of, again, how, like, you don't have a smiley face when you leave church to say, did you feel seen? Tick that box or push that button. How do we know that we are creating that environment? I guess if they keep coming back, that's a good indicator.
It is. But I mean, if I give you even just a small example from my own kids, I've got a 15-year-old, and because of the nature of the church we worship in, we do sometimes find ourselves at these different locations. And he's part of a really thriving, amazing youth group, right? Which I'm grateful for. It's on fire for God. There are lots of other teenagers, and that's a really important thing in his life. However, we have begun going a little more regularly to the church that does the all age service every single.
Yeah.
And that he has begun to say to me, and this happened last week, I actually think I'd rather go there. So I've been fascinated by this.
Yeah.
Because what it means is he's not seeing his mates. He's not going to an age and stage group. He's actually in and among a really quite young, well, not young in age, but a young church, but with multiple generations. And I think the power of it honestly is that there have been older people talking to him. He sat next to last week a tiny child who was about 2 or 3 that was being really funny, and that was just making him laugh. And I do think he's getting other things out of that. So even just him being seen that he's got a little one kind of looking up to him in the church and grinning at him, that makes him feel good. An older person asking him how his GCSEs are going is just being seen by being in and among everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we haven't even got to talking about how he could use his gifts in leadership. That would be a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's just something beautiful in and of itself about those relational connections for sure.
I could say the exact same for my teenagers at home. Like they have a youth group that is amazing, and it's fabulous, and they get to lead in that. But we've started doing like a dinner church thing in our home where it's intergenerational, and they get to lead and they get to talk to adults on deep topics. They're loving it. They just love it. And you're like, okay, the proof is in the pudding, I guess. It's like we keep talking about all this, but you actually try it out on your kids and they're like, yeah.
Yes.
And here's the thing. They have the blessing of not having to choose. They can do both. And
Yes.
there's richness in that. So we're not saying only do intergenerational, throw the youth group away. No
way.
No, because there is something powerful about being with your peers and talking about peer related things. But I think there's something special about on a Sunday when we gather for worship that is intergenerational and it's across and they have those connections and relationships. And the youth group can be any night of the week that works. But yeah.
I totally agree. And that is also the space where often they will look to, perhaps if you're blessed with lots of generations, that generation just ahead of them.
Yeah.
In our context, it would be perhaps some of the worship musicians that my kids will look to and think, they're passionate about their faith and they're 5 years or 10 years on from me.
Yeah.
And all of that disciples, doesn't it, richly?
Yeah, hugely. Yeah. But they need to see somebody who's been going on in faith for 40, 50 years and is still loving Jesus. Like that's so powerful. When they're having wobbles in their teenage years to go, wow, but that person's been through that and probably harder stuff and they're still following Jesus. And hearing them, talk about health challenges or whatever, which you think they might be bored by but they're not. They're like, oh, this is interesting. So yeah, it's fascinating.
And I remember as a little girl, actually, in my church that was very traditional, and I was quite bored in my church growing up. The one thing I did love, there was this lovely older lady who had 2 little white dogs, and she would often sit behind me and give me a little pack of Smarties. Probably she wouldn't get away with it nowadays, but I absolutely loved her, and I used to call her my little grandma. And, my grandparents lived miles away from me, and only reason I would really want to go to that church was to see my little grandma, because this small lady was just so kind. And again, it's nourishing, isn't it? In those ways, this is where the family of God can sometimes meet those relational needs that we don't necessarily have on our doorsteps anymore.
Yeah, and probably really nourishing for her to be able to engage with the child and lavish her love and her care and connect with you. Yeah.
Absolutely right. It's win-win. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So let's talk about, assuming that we're doing some intergenerational worship in our church service on a Sunday, how do we choose the songs? There are lots of children's songs out there in the world. You can do fishy music, you can do Doug Hawley, there's Vineyard Kids, there's all sorts of stuff out there. You've written quite a few.
Yeah, a lot.
There are songs that your church will have in the bank, as it were, like their faves. How do we choose them? I think the default people go for is that the children are often in at the beginning, and therefore the children's songs are high energy, quite hyperactive, happy clappy songs. And I'm not saying that that's bad necessarily, but you sort of mentioned it earlier that it tends to be the first start of worship, which we do tend to start with praise and adoration and something, a good old banger of a hymn or whatever it is, something that people can really get into. That's great for involving people, but it does tend to make the songs that we do with children be of a particular type. How can we choose songs well that are not just all the same type of songs? And any other tips you've got on how we pitch them or what keys we should sing in so that children can actually sing along?
Yeah,
That would be really helpful information.
of course. I mean, I think we need to have a really good look at the songs that we're using. And I'd say there are a few things we can consider. Think about the themes that we're singing. That's really important for unity because some kids' songs will be brilliant in kids groups or toddler groups, but won't be brilliant in an intergenerational setting. If they're singing about tiny little me, well, immediately that's only for the tiny little ones, which is so think about the language. And equally at the other end, there'll be some hymns that are glorious and poetic and rich and beautiful in language for adults and for some adults, but will be really lost on the kids. So finding songs that are simple enough, but not canning theology so that they're so sort of bland and nothing that the adults are going to switch off. And we're not really going to teach our kids anything either. So our way of writing is we always go we try and go simple and deep. And there'll be other songwriters out there doing that too. So that's kind of the themes and the lyrics. And you mentioned range. I mean, just really practically thinking particularly of little voices, but this actually helps most singers as well. A narrower range is better. It's sort of middle C, for those of you that are musical, and this is helpful, middle C, really just to the octave above. That's C to C range is really good for most people. Some men will want to push that up a notch. Some women might like to go down slightly, but much lower actually isn't great for children's voices, and much higher will begin to eliminate people as well. So kind of MIDI range songs work really well for everyone. Not that I would ever be religious about it. You can throw in the odd thing because people will join in or miss a note. It's fine, but that's a good guide. I think again, this point you were making, Melanie, of the one or two upbeat, which is the default. It's often good to start with praise and adoration and celebrate. A good way to bring people together. But I would say where we shortchange children is if that's all they get. It's a very narrow worship diet. And again, we need to remember that children are little people like we are. Some are introverted, some arrive worried, some don't like noise, and having a quieter moment can be really, really helpful. Now, if you're limited by the fact you've only got one song, and there's a bit of a ceiling over that at the moment, even just at the end of the song, one of the things we'll sometimes do is take that chorus and repeat it quietly. So there's an intimate moment, and all it's doing is extending the song slightly, but just creating a bit of space. If you've got more than one song, say you've even got two, make that second one something that's a bit more mid-tempo or slower. And we've written plenty of songs like this. One of our recent songs is called As We Wait, and it's simply a song about waiting on God. Now, that's a lovely moment to enjoy together. So bringing variety into the style of music as well will open hearts in a different way. Is that helpful, Melanie?
I think it is. I'm thinking about Christmas that's coming up.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of all the amazing Christmas songs that there are. And some of the children might even learn them in school. But we love doing Christmas often has a lot of singing, doesn't it?
Yes,
and
it does.
and it has traditional songs, but some of those songs are not the most child friendly. So I'm just thinking, how do we help young people engage in Christmas songs? And is it, if you're doing readings and you've got like an all age service where you're lighting candles or making Christingles or anything like that, we bring out these traditional hymns that we do at Christmas and everybody's like, oh yeah, great. But I'm just thinking the kids, it gets a bit lost on them. So have you got anything specific for Christmas that you would think would really work in an all age setting?
Well, it's very timely that you've asked, because we are literally in the process of releasing over the next few weeks some Christmas songs. We've got a
Fabulous.
new EP coming up, and we just brought out our first single last week, actually, but there's another one coming. And one of the interesting things we've done with this new collection, so we have already got some Christmas songs out there. There's Hear the Bells Ringing, Come Now and Worship, and they're quite, again, there's simple, but they are and singable for everyone, but not too monotonous. There's variety. But this new collection, we've actually taken "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him" and "Silent Night" and simplified them. So not changed all the lyrics. It's not like that. But we've, for example, with "Silent Night," taken it down to just 2 verses, because again, they can get long, which is tiring for kids. And then we've actually inserted a simple chorus that's really child-friendly, but releases some worship. And it's going to be called "The Light Has Come." And I think and then the other one, "Oh Come Let Us Adore Him," is actually great for all ages if you just take that refrain. For the song that then goes into "For You Alone Are Worthy, We'll Give Glory." So it's actually repetitive. It's just that chorus line. And we've added in some all age. I won't spoil this because it's not out.
You're teasing us.
Lines with a children's choir singing. And I think one of the ways we can, it's lovely if you've got a collection of children that can even just take as a little choir one verse or one chorus moment collectively at Christmas time. They love that. We've done that so many times, and they rise to it, and it's a little leadership moment, but they'll get confidence from one another as well.
Yeah.
So there are things out there, and we are really invested in resourcing Christmas because we love Christmas so much.
Yeah, yeah. And I just think it's a way forward with some churches that are doing a lot of hymns and are quite committed to singing hymns, that if you can musically, and this has been done by quite a lot of artists, where you have a traditional hymn and then you have a little chorus that you basically insert as like the chorus in between the verses. It's, again, if you're a child and you're trying to read all these words, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep up. It's hard, whether it's on a screen or in a hymn book. It's a lot to just follow along. So if there's a bit that repeats a bit more, now some hymns do that anyway, but if there's a bit that repeats or a chorus that they can come back to, then they're like, oh, I know this bit. And then I can engage, and I could just listen during the verses and ask questions about the lyrics, because sometimes they're strange because they're in an old style of English.
That's right.
It's worth explaining some of these things sometimes, and not assuming just because it's a Christmas carol that everybody knows what it means.
Everyone knows it. You're absolutely right. The other thing I'd say, I spent several years working as a primary school chaplain. So Christmas time in my chapel was very traditional. It was the traditional readings, and we would do the hymns. And actually, the school really wanted the children to grow up learning and knowing these. And I actually loved that. And it was candlelit, and it became very special for the whole school community. But we would always have just one moment with a contemporary song. And all we had in that chapel was the ability to press a CD. Honestly, it was not high tech. We would select one more modern Christmas song. They are out there, something like the stuff we're writing. And that would be actually, the contrast of that in a traditional setting is really beautiful. Again, that variety. Lift the room. Everybody would love it. For those that really love the tradition, they would still enjoy this different moment that the children, and sometimes the children would prepare a little dance. So again, if there's any way to involve the children in a moment like that, I'd really recommend.
Oh, it sounds beautiful. I'm feeling Christmassy already. Get the music on. We're ready now.
The tree will be up before the end of the day, Melanie.
I know. Got to get out of the loft. Where can people find the new music, and where can they find the rest of the songs that you're writing?
Well, our website is worshipforeveryone.com, where we've got loads of songs and just a bit more about who we are. And also, just to mention, we also run songsforschool.com, which is another website where the songs are really Christian based, but they're very values based, so they can be used in any school. So if you're people that are also linked to primary schools, these songs can be a wonderful bridge into church. And then our YouTube channel, which is just, if you look at Worship for Everyone on YouTube, actually all our songs with lyric videos are there for free. So if you're a church that you would find lyric videos helpful, and lots are, then do go check that out as well.
And where can they learn the actions from? They've got
equally, there
is
are
that on YouTube as well?
YouTube video, on our YouTube page with, there's loads of them. Some of them are teach the actions, some of them are the full song set to actions with words as well. And we're continuing to also work with Count Everyone In, which is an organisation that works with adults with learning difficulties and children with additional needs. And so we've actually now got 10 of our songs signed with Makaton as well, both for schools and also for churches. So again, if you're wanting to experiment with actions, but in a really, really inclusive way, those videos might be a good place to start.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds really good. Thank you so much, Becky. Really appreciate this. Thanks for your wisdom and time.
Thanks for having me.
Becky's written an article in Roots Intergenerational series on choosing worship songs. You can find it on the Roots website. Links to Nick and Becky Drake's Worship for Everyone website and YouTube channel are in the show notes, and their new Christmas album is out now. Each week, Roots publishes a list of 20 suggested hymns and songs that link to the weekly readings and themes for our Roots Worship Together subscribers. This list includes both traditional hymns and old favourites, new hymns and contemporary worship songs. So whether you've got an organ, an orchestra, a band, or you're playing recorded music, we've got you covered. Songs are annotated with why it's been recommended, if it will be appropriate in intergenerational worship, and there are links to be able to listen, see the lyrics, and find out which hymn book it's in. If you subscribe to Roots Children and Youth, we suggest 10 songs that could be sung or played during your sessions, covering not to fives, children and youth. Roots exists to help you lead great church that's growing, relevant, engaging, authentic and together. Head to rootsforchurches.com to take a free trial and explore our wealth of resource, available for a very affordable annual subscription. You can explore a digital subscription or add on our stunning full-colour magazines that help you prepare and share offline. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share it with leaders in your church and network, and leave us a review as that helps others find it. Together, we can grow.